There are interesting things about certain things. I'm going to not worry about that. Generally,
All right.
let's put this between us. How about?
Oh, yeah, sure. That's not good. Okay, let's get started, please. If folks could have a seat. Good morning. This is HTTP. If you're not here for HTTP, it's maybe best to go somewhere else, but maybe not. Okay. So today we have a few different active drafts to discuss, and then we have other topics. Before we get started, we do need a scribe for this session. Do we have any volunteers to take notes? Oh, thank you so much. Lovely. That was easy. Do we have a Note Well slide?
We do.
Let's look at a Note Well slide. So hopefully by this time of the week, you're familiar with this. The Note Well is the terms and conditions under which we all participate in IETF activities. This includes things like harassment and code of conduct. It includes things like copyright and patent, and the privacy policy. The meetings are recorded, for example. If you're not, and also, of course, all the procedures we use to make our decisions and so forth and so on. If you're not familiar with this, please do take some time to get familiar with it. You can find it in any internet search engine. Well, no, you can find it in most internet search engines by searching for IETF Note Well. Potentially any.
Could you ask an LLM?
It's too early for that. Right, so before we get to the substantive work, the active drafts, and we have one other topic, we wanted to have a discussion that we had on the mailing list as well about rechartering the group. Our area director pointed out that our charter has not been updated in quite some time, and that it didn't really match what we were actually doing. And so we, after a bit of back and forth, we came up with a proposal for an update to that. We had good feedback on the list, but we wanted to give some time in the room to make sure that we heard any other feedback people had or any suggestions. Do we have a slide for that?
We do. I guess just before we jump into that, any bashing of the agenda. So we'll be going through these 4 active drafts and then one proposed topic. We will be also meeting on Friday, and we have more time for other active drafts and proposed topics. Okay, if that's all good, we'll move on to reviewing the proposed charter. Julian, please go ahead. Did you have?
Good morning, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think Anna wants to move his presentation in front of the query thing, and that works for me.
Sorry.
Did you say Anna wants to move before query?
Yep.
Okay, that's good for you?
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
We'll do that then.
All right.
Okay.
Jumping to the charter then.
Sure. Right. So our old charter had reference to the HTTP core work. We finished that quite some time ago. So we took that out and we made this just kind of focus on what we've been doing for quite some time, which is maintaining and developing extensions to the protocol and kind of overseeing the general evolution of HTTP. So this had a fair amount of discussion on the list. If we'll just give folks a minute to read this if they haven't seen it before, and if we have any more feedback in the room, we'd love to hear it. Hi, Anno.
Nice rainbow.
Okay, I'm not hearing any feedback here. I mean, if we had hold music, we would play it. It sounds like based on what the discussion we've had on the mailing list and the lack of any pushback here, that that seems ready to go. So we'll continue the discussion with the area director, and he will take the appropriate steps. It sounds like. And any further comment, Mike? No, you're good. I don't mean to make you get up this early in the morning, but if you. Yeah.
No, so one of the reasons we've held off on pushing buttons is that the PTTH BOF may result in that coming into this working group. That is one possible outcome.
Mhm.
So we haven't actually moved forward to this before we decide whether we ought to mention any of that.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I mean, that's presumably would fall under an extension, so.
Yeah, I mean, my initial reaction to that would be a milestone, maybe would be most appropriate. Okay, let's move on. So I think we said we'd put Anna first. So Anna, take it away. Can you remotely do the slides?
You should be able to request control of slides if you want to be able to click them yourself.
If you can do the slides, that would be great.
Okay.
Although I guess now they won't animate, but that's fine. That's fine.
There we go.
Yeah, so I wanted to give a quick update on the layered cookies work. I hope you can all hear me fine. There's a little bit of echo on my side, but I'll just keep talking. Next slide, please. Right, so to recap of what we're trying to do with the layered cookies work, we essentially want to sort of take out all the browser-specific requirements out of the current cookie draft. Like it has a lot of references to browsing context and documents and all kind of various things that like are not universal to all clients or server software. And so we'd like to abstract that out and then essentially have like two sections at the bottom. One that is sort of like has the requirements that are applicable to all clients. And then a section of like the requirements that we want to apply to browsers, but they will actually be applied to browsers by sort of like host specifications, so to say. And as part of this effort, we want to take care of partitioning third-party cookies, standardize modest improvements, and there's a lot of activity going on in WhatWG and in the W3C that sort of complements this effort around cookies. So the storage access API, there is a cookie store API for better cookie access from JavaScript, so that you no longer have to do string manipulation to get at a cookie, and you can get at cookies from workers and not just from documents. All right, that's a recap. Next slide, please. Okay, so what's the state of the work? Well, we've been adopted as a draft, and you can see us on the HTTP extensions page. And thanks for supporting our work. We've added some new prefixes. Thanks to Yoav for working on those, the HTTP and host HTTP prefixes. These complement the existing host and secure prefixes. There's a proposed delete cookie header that is still under consideration, but I suspect we'll end up doing something with. And oh yeah, I also wanted to call out that there was some feedback at the HTTP workshop that it's not great that the client and server requirements are sort of somewhat desperate. And if anyone has like good suggestions for how we can reconcile those, that would be good. So I guess it's a call for feedback on that in particular. Next slide, please. All right, thank you. That was it.
Great, thanks, Anna. Any questions, comments for this draft? I'd say we're kind of in still the early stages of this one, right, Anna?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we've only published one ID, and that's it so far.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing anything in the room, so thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
Okay, let's move on then. I think we have Julian next with query. Julian?
Yep. Hello.
Hello.
Once again. Yeah, so we don't have slides. Is Mike in the room?
Mike is in the room.
Okay. I have updated the issues in GitHub. So if you want to put that on screen. So we have maybe half of them I labeled editorial now. And we have one resolved one. I think that's the redirection thing. And the main things that are left are conditionals and caching. At least the conditional thingy depends on how we define selected representations for the query method. And I think that's the, apart from the caching issue, that's the most important thing right now.
Maybe filter editorial.
Yeah, I got that right. Very good.
I'll jump into.
The question about selected representation, I think if we have an answer to that, then it will answer the question about conditionals as well. So we need to get that done first. Yeah. Yeah. Mike, go on.
I think there's also a question about what a conditional request means for query. So with get, you retrieve the object and then apply the conditions to that to decide whether to send it back. With post, you apply the conditions before you do the operation to decide whether the operation takes place at all. And I think the real question here is with query, which of those modes do we expect to be operating in? Because there is a difference between, do I not need to execute the search again because the data hasn't changed, and the data has changed but the results are the same, so I don't need to send it back? Do we want both? Both might be difficult. Is one or the other clearly better? And right now, I don't think the draft has an answer to that.
Yeah, so it seems to me that we need to answer the selected representation thing anyway, and also discuss what we actually want for query, and hopefully we can synchronize that in some way. One thing we should keep in mind, I think the concept of sending or identifying the URI of a resource where you can just continue the query with get. If that happens, and we should encourage that, all these open issues go away, because then all the definitions for get will apply, That means conditionals, range requests, and caching. So that's important to understand that if the server chooses to hand out that URI and the client chooses to actually use that, then all these open questions become moot. We can't rely on that for the query spec, but for the query method itself. But it's good to keep in mind that if the client actually got that URI, all these issues vanish.
Martin? No.
Yeah, so Julian, I think, at least in my mind, this had the model for get, not post.
Right.
The conditions on post are specific because post is it's a special sort of get out of jail free card for the protocol. But in this case, if you model the payload of the query as essentially giving you a path to a specific URL that you don't know yet, and you're effectively just getting with a URL that you don't know about because you have this huge query, then that sort of leads you very naturally to the conclusions that this is just a get for the purposes of selecting representations, for caching, for a bunch of these other things. And so I think I'd encourage you to follow that path. Is there any reason that you can see why you would not go that way?
So that feeds into another discussion that we've been having with Roy, that 9110 special cases get for a lot of behaviors and treats all other methods in a different class. And so to say that this method gets the same behavior as get requires updating 9110 to expand that scope. Which, on the one hand, it's just metadata tag. On the other hand, I really didn't want to open 9110 for the spec.
Yeah, and so in my last comment, I had that optimistic hope that we can answer in the context of this spec what selected representation would mean for all new methods. So the obviously the three WebDAV methods that are safe and idempotent and take content fall into the same category as query. I understand that nobody cares about those, but from a systematic point of view, those have exactly the same properties. But I mean, what about patch? I know that we don't need to answer that right now, but it would be good to understand the whole model. And maybe that's something that will need to go into a revision of the base spec, but not in the context of this spec, because I absolutely don't want to update the base spec.
I agree with that. I think our current definition of selected representation already accommodates this. It says an algorithm usually based on content negotiation would be used to select one of those representations as being most applicable to a given request. And I think it's that last clause that makes all the difference. It's in the context of a request, and by its nature, a request includes its method.
Yeah, I'd encourage you to steer away from anything that is not safe and idempotent. I do appreciate the idea that there's that, but that text there seems to fit fairly well with the conceptual model that we have here. If there are special cases in 9110 that need to be updated, I don't think we should shy away from that.
Right.
It's unfortunate, but no work is ever perfect, and we can accept that. If it requires an updates tag, then well, okay.
Well, and
Lessons learned.
I think this gets to the heart of, the feedback we got from Roy, in that 9110 was written in a way that assumed that there would ever only be one get-like method for a pretty good reason. And we are violating that assumption somewhat violently for a reasonably good reason too. And so now we have to reconcile that.
That happens.
Yeah.
So I like the suggestion from Martin that this really needs to be in sync with GET with respect to selected representation. That's the one that we want to follow. And we probably should think that through for conditionals, what that means. Maybe Mike can follow up on that. And then maybe I can try to answer those questions that I had in this comment based on the assumption that we really want to treat the selected representation as if it was GET with a body. So, Mark, if we did that, would that help with the caching question?
With respect to the, can you cache it for a GET request after you see the query request? Or?
Yeah, we had that big discussion with Roy whether we actually can make a method other than GET cacheable. And I think Mark has demonstrated that in practice that already happens for post in a limited way. And so that it seems that this the discussion about whether we can cache that falls into the same category as with a selected representation, whether we model that exactly like GET, except that a cache would need to take the content into account. I believe this is what we are saying right now. And we need to understand whether we can actually make that. So that would mean that Mark has to go through the discussion with Roy to come to a conclusion, or whether we decide that Roy is in the rush. But at some point, we need to figure out what the answer is.
I think my recollection of the discussion with Roy was that he backed away from his position a little bit, and I think his last statement was roughly along the, oh, here we go. As much as I disagree with the idea, the way forward is to clearly document how query cache differs from GET in all respects. And if it accurately describes the trade-offs for implementation, I won't have a problem with it. And perhaps that's, I think, maybe where we could do better in terms of describing that, you know, if you're going to assume that this does caching, realize it requires reading the entire request body and, you know, potentially normalizing it. And there's a lot of efficiency and reliability issues around that. And so don't use this for, you know, its caching properties unless you really need it or something along those lines.
Yeah, and if you do need to cache it, then transform it into a gettable URL and cache that for better efficiency.
And if we can highlight especially the pattern of that, where it's you know, provide a gettable URL and your clients will have a better time, you know, in certain patterns.
And that would go, that advice would go into the query method definition itself, or even into the introduction, to clarify that in the best case, a server executes the query and also provides that gettable URI so that the client can proceed with that one with a GET request, if caching is of any importance for the client.
I do think we can make progress here. We just need to take some time and find the right text to satisfy the concerns.
And for context for the working group, in case people haven't been following this exchange too closely, what's happening, we wouldn't normally have an HTTP directorate review of a document from the HTTP working group. But because I'm an editor on the draft and I'm the responsible AD for this group, Gory is taking over as the responsible AD for this document. And because Gory doesn't have an HTTP background, he is delegating his AD review to the HTTP directorate. And so Roy is effectively doing the AD review here.
Yeah, and we should also say that all the feedback that Roy sent was good. It was for the work on this draft, it was kind of late because we are past working group last call. And with all these editorial and partly non-editorial changes, we may want to discuss whether we need to another working group last call. But that's up to the AD and the chairs.
Yeah, I think let's cut a new version. Let's get these issues taken care of. I'm guessing based on the scope, and if we are going to be marking updates, which it sounds like we may need to do, which is okay, this is something that we could run another short column if we need to. But I think we'll evaluate that once we see the change in the text.
Yep. And I think with that, we are done with this draft, at least with the discussion for this draft for today.
Okay. Thank you very much, Julian. All right. Let's move on then. I think next we have resumable uploads. Nice.
Do you want to share? Yes. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. This is a brief update on the resumable uploads draft that we've been working on over the last 2-3-ish years. As a brief reminder of how this resumable upload things work, the client can basically indicate its interest when starting a data transfer using just a simple header. And if the server wants to allow resumable uploads, which it might not always do, it then creates an upload resource and communicates its URI back to the client, which can then use it to resume the upload if it got interrupted. If it never got interrupted, the data transfer just completes as normal and the upload resource is never used. But if there's interruptions, then uploads can be resumed and become more resilient against failures. Since the last IETF, we published 2 new draft versions. Thank you very much to Julian for all of his very detailed feedback. That resulted in a few changes. None of these are too substantial in that they change how this overall process works. It's mostly about a few rewordings, making some assumptions more clear. For example, that now both parties have to adhere to limits. Before it was a should, now it's a must, because why shouldn't it be? We also rephrased how concurrent requests have to be handled, focusing less on the details, what the server has to do, but more on what outcome we want to have, so that it works for the client and the server can choose whatever mechanism fits into that description. We also added a dedicated section for the new interim status code. We rephrased the recommendations for sending information back to the client. Before that used content location, but in a way that wasn't really fitting its semantics. We made sure it's clarified what happens when too much data is sent. We extended our security considerations and also reconsidered when clients should be allowed to retry and not. So overall, these are some nice changes. And with that, we don't have any open issues or pull requests anymore. So from that perspective, the draft is rather much finished. We've not only worked on the draft, but also on implementations in the past. These have existed already for some time. There's clients for iOS and macOS. It's integrated into the URL session API. I think it also works on other operating systems. We have a JavaScript client that runs in the browser as well as server side. So that's Node.js and other worker environments. We have servers in Swift, Go, and .NET. And at the IETF in Dublin, we also spent some time testing interoperability. It worked really well. They basically all were able to communicate together. The one question mark is because I think we didn't have enough time to test that one, but I'll be sure to check if that works or not. Speaking of interoperability, I've also been working on a tool for testing server and client conformance. It's not yet ready for publication, but I will continue working on this. So you can just point your server to it or vice versa, and then get some results back if the spec is kind of okay implemented. Gotta be hopefully pretty handy. We not only have implementations, we also have some production experience. This protocol has not been deployed into production as far as I know, but there's previous work on resumable uploads by the TUS project. It's very similar in scope. It has roughly the same or pretty much the same approach to resumable uploads. It's just that header fields, media types are called slightly different. There's no interim status code. But overall, like how the approach work is really similar. And this has been deployed for many years already in production by multiple vendors, Cloudflare, Vimeo, just loaded, of course, Httpbis and Zulip as well. And all of the experience that we gathered over the years has fed back into that protocol and this draft. So we also have some production experience that shaped this. So I'm also pretty confident that we don't do something that's extremely stupid here. I will be trying to get engineers from these companies to review that draft, but I'm not sure how far I'll get there, but I'll try my best. So yeah, even from that perspective, I think this is a thing that has been slightly tested in production as well. And I think that's all I have for now. From our perspective at editors and authors, this draft is ready, and I would like to ask the working group to consider our last call.
Thank you. That's what we like to hear from authors. Very good. Any feedback, questions, comments on this draft? In the room, who has read this draft at some point? Okay, that's a good smattering of hands. So I think we will start working for last call. So yeah, we'll start that process, and hopefully we'll get through that smoothly and get you off to the next stage. So thank you very much.
Thank you as well.
For the notes, I guess that was like, I don't know, what, a dozen hands?
I'd
10?
say on the order of 10 to 15 hands, yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, and so next, Kazuho with incremental HTTP messages.
Making good time.
We're making very good time.
Yeah.
Hey. So,
Do you want us to?
You want me to share?
thank you very much.
Absolutely.
So I'll be giving updates for the incremental HTTP messages. Next, please. So based on the feedback that we got at Ietf 122, we've closed these 3 issues with no action. So next, please. And then we have merged 2 pull requests that makes editorial clarifications. One is that the endpoints can buffer header or trail sections even when there is the incremental header field. So it's essentially saying that the incremental header field only applies to the body rather than to the header and trail sections. And the next one is explains what it means to have the incremental signal in both directions. So next, please. So specifically, it says that it explicitly states that if you set incremental header field in both directions, then the HTTP request response acts essentially as a bidirectional byte stream, assuming that the intermediaries respect that. Not that the behavior when there's no proxy involved has always been the case. I mean, if the client sends an incremental request and then if the server sends an incremental response, regardless of the existence of the header, the HTTP request response cycle essentially becomes a bidirectional byte stream. But so the effect of incremental header field is that it's a signal to the proxy to indicate that the client or the server wants to use the stream in that way. But as we know, we also have the extended connect scheme, which is a more safer or a more proper way of creating bidirectional protocols, especially when you're designing bidirectional protocols and standards bodies such as Ietf. So we explicitly clarify that. So that's all the updates from us. So next, please. And we have no other open issues or pull requests. So can we go to the last call?
Once again, something the chair likes to hear. Any feedback, discussion of this draft? I'll ask the same question in the room. How many people have read this draft? Show of hands. Okay, even a few more, I'd say, on the order of maybe 15 to 20.
Thank you.
I'm also author, but I guess asking implementation stuff, I mean, it's quite simple, but I guess, are we aware of people using this yet? I think that's one other nice thing to ask as we go to the last call.
Personally, I don't, but yeah, it should be easy to implement.
Yeah, okay. That may be something that'd be good for us all collectively to do if we're interested in it in parallel with progressing the document.
Great. All right, so I think, again, we'll start the work group last call.
We have Ben.
We do. Ben, hello.
Hi, Ben Schwartz. The draft talks mostly about intermediaries, but I think one really interesting place to implement this, where it would actually be very helpful, is in client networking stacks. So if you are the maintainer of an HTTP client implementation, consider that if somebody puts in a request with an incremental header, that that really, in a way, they're telling you they want a bidirectional byte stream. They want to start getting response bytes before finishing the request.
Thank you, Ben. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to encourage. And maybe it's worth looking into the draft to see if it incorporates that explicitly. So thank you for the feedback.
Sounds good.
Martin?
I was just going to follow up on that. I'm not aware of many client APIs that don't have this capability inherently. Most client APIs sort of work in the sort of you put the head in there, and then you have an incremental thing that you can write into, and you can read responses while that writing is happening. Once the header's out, then you're good to go. That is a pretty common pattern. Anyone who's not implementing a client in that way, come and talk to me afterwards. I have words.
Martin would like to see you in the back alley. Yes, okay. All right. So that sounds great. I'm wondering, because this does touch especially intermediary vendors, which, sometimes they're a little more slow to pay attention, we might make the working group last call a little longer here, just to make sure we get full feedback. But that sounds really good. And it's great to see this work progressing, because we've been talking about it in the community for a fairly long time now, haven't we? Yeah. All right. Thanks, Kazuo.
Thank you.
So that ends our discussion of the active drafts for today. We have some more on Friday, I believe, yes? But we have one other topic, and we have plenty of time left, so we can discuss that at our leisure. Yaroslav? And also, if we have other business people want to bring up, we probably will have time for that too. But take it away, Yaroslav. If you want to, sure.
Oh,
If we can, does it?
Let's see. So you want me to share? Where are we? This one. Okay, does it work? Let's see what this works. Oh, no, wait, hold on.
Special buttons.
No, I need to pass control to the clicker. Oh, geez, how do I do that?
There's magic for this.
There is magic for this.
Do you invite someone or something, or?
Okay, I can. It's
Just tell us next slide, perhaps. Yeah, sorry.
all right. No worries. Oh, nope.
Try it now.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
There we go. How did you do it?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Yaroslav, and today I would like to present detecting outdated proxy configuration work. So this came up when, uh, together with Tommy and Dragana, we were working on proxy configuration in PVDs. Um, we were discussing what about versioning and how clients could learn that updated version is available, and decided that it's perhaps worth a separate draft, because that's a little bit more generic than just proxy configuration in PVD formats. So to define problem statement, pack files and also PVD configs, they are pooled. Fundamentally, they're pooled by the clients. There is an avalanche of mechanisms exist to detect and enforce proxy configuration, WPAD, GPOs, all sorts of operating system specific mechanisms. For the most part, these mechanisms boil down to a configuration URL that clients then use to pull a pack file from, typically over HTTPS. Then again, because it's pool mechanism, it's ultimately down to client to decide when to fetch updates, when to check that this pack file is, or PVD proxy config is outdated. There are certain hints that servers can provide to clients telling when they should try and fetch a new one. So in case of HTTP, we have headers such as expires. For PVD configs, we have expires JSON key, but it's all about planned updates. So if I'm updating my proxy configuration every 12 hours or whatever, then I can just configure my headers accordingly and hope that client will respect those headers. But of course, proxy configuration updates not always have to deliver it in a planned fashion. Misconfigurations happen, proxy outages happen, and not all outages are considered by the configurations. So proxy configurations can have like list of proxies, primer and backups and what have you, but sometimes everything fails and you need some kind of fail safe. And there are things like unplanned migration. Sadly, I've personally witnessed situations when organizations lost millions of dollars because of outages related to proxy configurations, and some people losing jobs because of that. So that can have quite dramatic consequences. To mitigate this, quite often vendors configure their clients to pull pack files very frequently. So I believe in Windows, for example, when you configure system pack file, then it fetches it few times per minute to check, has it updated, has it updated, has it updated, which creates unnecessary load and noise and logs and what have you. So the proposal in this proposal is to make things a little bit better. There are two parts to this proposal. One is client header. So client could inform HTTP proxy about configuration that it is using and when it was last fetched. So it could work with any proxy that works over HTTP, so including all the prior of mask proxies, connect UDP, IP, templated, connect TCP, and potentially whatever future will invent. The idea of the header, it's a structured header, consists of two parts. There is an optional URL that tells to the proxy, this is the configuration address that I'm using. So I'm reaching out to you because this configuration tells me to do that, and fetched timestamp when it was fetched by the client. URL is optional. It can be omitted if configuration is coming from the default PVD location, which is https proxy authority .well known /pvd. So that's the, hopefully will become the new standard for PVD location. So we can omit that if we're using that location. And then proxy could respond to the client with an optional header, proxy stale config, optional Boolean header, either saying that, hey, your configuration is stale, true, you should refresh your configuration. Zero means, or false means that configuration address is known to the proxy and the proxy believes that it's not stale. And absence of this header means that extension is either not supported by the proxy, or proxy doesn't really know about your configuration URL, so it cannot advise to you if your configuration is up to date or not. This header could be included in both successful or error response. So if proxy produces an error, it could be because of outdated configuration. So it's actually pretty useful to signal to client that, hey, there is an error and you should fetch updated configuration. Also, current draft mentions that it really mustn't be used when error is due to authentication error. So if client is not properly authenticated on the proxy, giving information if it's out of date or not out of date configuration could potentially lead to some reconnaissance attacks. So that's the proposal. Any questions, comments, suggestions? Oh, one more thing. When we were discussing this earlier, we're considering using e-tags. The problem with e-tags, they are just hashes. They are not sequential. So proxy would need to be aware of all the historical e-tags. So it won't know if e-tag that it's not aware that client is coming from, is it some historic e-tag or future e-tag that it's not yet aware of. So that's why the proposal is to use fetch timestamp instead of e-tag.
So thank you for that. I'll jump in. I guess if you want something that's sequential and not an e-tag, then the first thing that would come to mind would be last modified. But just to make sure I understand, the proposal is to piggyback this mechanism on top of other traffic that is sent to the proxy, correct?
Correct. That would be included in client request to the proxy, so connect or get in case of HTTP1 for certain proxying schemes, and then proxy would include its response header in its own successful or unsuccessful response as a header.
Right. So in the case of connect, then that effectively terminates at the proxy because you're addressing the proxy with a request. But in the case of get or other more traditional HTTP traffic, then the question is, do you forward the header on or do you strip it?
Good one, probably should be addressed in the draft. I would expect that proxy would need to strip it.
Okay. But then you have to have, as a client, you have to have some certainty that the proxy is going to strip it, I think. And you might need some negotiation there.
Right.
So something to think about.
Okay.
So I see, I'll stop because I see we have a queue, although it's not showing here for some reason. Travis is first.
Hi, Travis Langston Apple. So I maintain our pack implementation there, and yeah, I could definitely see a use for this. I mean, we're a little bit slower than fetching it several times per minute, thankfully. We're more like, we have a 2-minute inactivity timer, which will bump up as soon as we keep getting pack queries and everything. But yeah, the end result is it's still fairly frequent. It's still on the order of fetching it like every less than 10 minutes or so. So yeah, I could see us using something like this to potentially improve that, and that'd be a good thing to do. Yeah.
Thank you, Travis.
Alessandro Ghedini, Cloudflare. I might have missed a bit. So to me, stale means the client might fetch the new configuration later, or is this like the client has to fetch the new configuration to continue?
It's a hint. So it's ultimately down to client to decide what to do with this information.
So,
potentially proxy could be misconfigured or not aware that configuration could be revoked. So it could every time give client, regardless what it comes from, potentially proxy config stale ?1. So the client would need to obviously implement certain rate limiting logic not to be confused by a bogus proxy.
Yeah, I was wondering about the case where the proxy might want the client to fetch the new configuration because maybe there's like a vulnerability in the old configuration or something, and it needs to, I don't know, do something. Could it be that there's like maybe the proxy returns like a status, like an error status code to just tell the client to, fetch the new configuration and then come back?
So it feels to me that we have enough status codes in HTTP. I'm not sure if we need to invent a special one for that. But
not a new status code, maybe like figure out if there is an existing status code that can be used.
Okay, that's yeah, that's certainly something to explore, and if there is a recommendation we could make in a draft, that's certainly worthwhile. And yes, one thing that obviously we're not doing here, we're not proxy is not signaling to client a new URL for configuration that could lead to all sort of security troubles.
The other sort of comment I had is you use a timestamp, as far as I understand.
Yep.
I wonder if it would make sense to have like some kind of configuration ID instead. But it's
yeah, the problem with, we could potentially add configuration IDs in proxy configs in PVDs because it's still work in progress. But there is no configuration ID in pack files. The only thing that exists in HTTP that's somewhat similar is eTag, but as discussed, they are not sequential. So that's why fetch
okay.
timestamps
Yeah, makes sense.
here.
Ben.
Hey, Ben Schwartz. So I have a speaking slot at on Friday's meeting for a draft related to HTTP request proxying, and in the course of working on that draft, I realized that I needed something that bears some resemblance to this, and so that draft actually also contains a slightly different idea of providing a way to say you're using the wrong proxy, like you need to change your configuration. In that case, I actually did write essentially what you could call a redirect capability. So an ability to signal back, here's the new configuration information that you should use, instead of just go refetch from whatever source you started with. So I think that the exact details of functionality here are going to be interesting to sort out. Whether we need some kind of redirection or not. As you said, it is dangerous in some cases. And whether it's a new header or proxy status header, I think the biggest question to me is, do you need the ability to signal stale on successful responses?
Well, my experience tells yes. Again, we don't necessarily want client to fail to be able to signal that configuration is outdated. So we see there is a request, and proxy configuration can be quite sophisticated. You could have many proxies. So I see that request is coming and I can proxy that. That's great. But I would like to, I know that other requests from the client might fail. Another common situation is when I want to gracefully shut down the proxy. So I want to stop clients using that. This could be a way for a proxy, as long as it sees requests coming to it, it would signal that, hey, I'm going to be shut down, so your configuration is stale, and then be able to shut down this proxy as soon as it doesn't see requests for a certain amount of time. So drain the proxy, so to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
All right. I jumped in queue purely as a interested individual. So yeah, I mean, thank you for bringing this up. I know I suggested that this would be a good venue to discuss. I think we're having a good discussion already. I do think that this is useful. There is a real problem that's kind of cropping up in multiple areas. I definitely agree that this is something that we should be able to signal not just on an error. So it's not just a error status code. I think there are cases where you may need to signal both for the draining case, but also something has changed and now there should be more that should be proxied. And again, it's a hint, but it's saying that you may need to expand your configuration, and what you're doing right now is good, but you need to do more potentially, or something additionally, or do it at some different weight. I think there are a lot of details in the spelling here that probably need to be worked out, and that is where I think this community and this type of review would be very useful, because I think the details need to be worked out, and there are going to be a lot of interesting cases of how you would handle more traditional reverse proxies and how things would go through different intermediaries. And then just the thing I wanted to bring up additionally is that I think that, yeah, there's a really big diversity potentially of configurations and configuration sources. You mentioned some of them, but I think it is even bigger than that potentially, at least in the experience I've had on doing proxying from the client. So two dimensions here. One is that like there may not be even just one version or e tag. Like we have cases where, you know, different clients, depending on your account on something or what type of client you are, may have different flavors of that config that they get. And maybe they still share a single proxy. And so the proxy won't just have like, oh, I have the one universal configuration for everyone. I don't have one e tag or one version, but still people may be stale. So it's more like an epoch across clients. Yes.
Yeah, to answer that one, I think the current proposal effectively addresses that, because when proxy generating a response, it already have authentication information from the client. So even though client is not explicitly signaling its own ID or whatever, proxy already have this information if client authentication is involved.
And potentially like a timestamp approach, I'm not saying that the timestamp is what we want to end with, but allows you to kind of have this epoch as opposed to saying, oh, it was version 25. But it's more just a consideration as we are looking in the design space, and that one of the constraints I want to bring up. The other thing, like beyond the PVD JSON config and beyond pack files, there are going to be more proprietary configs, what we use for some of the privacy proxying things. I'd love to move to something standard like the PVD config, but it's a different format right now because it was brought up proprietarily. Those still have the same problems of wanting to know that something is stale. Also, there are cases where clients can be configured, let's say, by like an enterprise MDM with a profile. It's not even a URL, a traditional URL fetched thing. It's coming from some other management pushing source where you can still refresh and you can still want to know that this thing is stale. So like if we try to go the direction of saying, oh, there's an e tag or there's a version, that diversity of sources may make it complex.
Thank you.
Mike.
So not as AD, but it occurs to me that really you do have the two cases here where your config is fine, it's just a little bit out of date and you should update it, or your config is catastrophically wrong and you need to go refetch it immediately. It so happens that we do have a status code for you need to start over and try this request again from the beginning. That's 421. So I wonder if maybe we just, yeah, I see the expression on Mark's face. I wonder if maybe we just need to say that if you get a 421 from a proxy, you should refresh your configuration as part of that retrying.
How do you know it's from the proxy?
Oh, it's connected.
Well, in this case, you have a proxy config that told you to talk to a proxy.
Actually gets to my question.
So, yeah, I mean, this is a response on the outer request, not on the inner request, per se.
Yeah, and I think that actually answers one of the first comments about a special status code that we could use. And yeah,
I don't think we necessarily need a distinct one because we have one that's pretty close that could be extended. Now, I think where your comment goes to, when you're going over TLS and you have an outer request and an inner request, you can clearly differentiate what's from the proxy and what's not. If you're doing plain text to the proxy to get a plain text resource, or TLS to the proxy to get a plain text resource, then you just see everything together, and yeah, you can't trust it. On the other hand, if you get a 421 on that proxied request, then maybe you should refresh your proxy config anyway.
Thank you.
Okay. So just as myself, I think I made the face about 421 because it's about the connection. It's about using a new connection for this. And this has nothing to do with the connection. This is just, you need to refresh. I mean, yeah, maybe you do need a new connection, but it's a little separate from the concerns here. But that's details we can talk about later, I think. I got into queue ask, your use case here, is it really for typical web traffic? Because if it is, it seems to me that you could simplify or at least reduce a lot of potential complexity by just restricting this to requests that are explicitly to the proxy like connect, and not layering it on to get traffic and so forth and so on. If that still works for your use case, I suspect you're going to avoid a lot of corner cases. And just generally, I'm a little uncomfortable with the leaking of that data potentially to the servers. But I also, looking at the problem space here, I would encourage you to think about this not as just specific to configuration, but it's a more generic problem, which is cache invalidation, which is something we have talked about from time to time. There was a proposal back in 1998 from Balachandra Krishnamurthy and Craig Wills, which are names that maybe some people in this room recognize. If Julian's still with us, he probably does. For piggyback cache invalidation, which was doing exactly this for invalidations. And I know that for other use cases beyond just configuration, cache invalidation is a very valuable facility. So if we can think about it at that level, we can solve other problems too, potentially. Just putting that out there.
Thank you.
Okay. So it sounds like there's interest in this, especially since we have another draft that we're going to discuss on Friday that kind of has similar concerns. So I think at this point, keep the discussion going on the lists in the hallways, and we'll see where it goes. Thank you. Okay, so that's all we have today. We can give you about 28 minutes back, I think, and we'll see everyone on Friday. Thank you.
And thank you to our note taker.
Indeed. I don't expect us to stop. Yes. Yes. Okay. We can take it over.
Hey Ben, I don't see it for what it's worth. You won't see me Friday because I'm in law.
You're no. Okay.
Thanks. It was good.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Good
that
discussion. Was there a particular thing you were interested in there?
Um,
So yeah, I'm happy
No, I
to
just
keep working.
flippantly respond